Thank you for joining me today. This past week has been incredible. We've watched major headlines being made around the world. The World Economic Forum, Davos, a board of peace, major announcements by AI. Well, we did a panel discussion, a prophetic panel discussion with several of us, and I think you're really going to enjoy these topics. You know what? I really believe we're watching the setup for the Antichrist as the tribulation would begin. Thank God the rapture comes first. Well, you're going to really enjoy this program. It's going to be in several parts, but here's part one.
And they talk about this one guy's name is Ali Shah, I think, something like that, a widely respected technocrat leader who will oversee the restoration of core public services, rebuilding civil institutions, and stabilizing the daily life in Gaza, really. Well, yeah, technocrats are basically going to take over the system at this point, obviously. But here's an interesting observation. What Trump is exhibiting some flavor of the take charge guy. Like that's going to be the Antichrist in the end. He's going to be a take charge guy. I'm not saying that's Trump. I don't think it is, but a global scholar from a few years ago wrote a book called Connectography. His name was Parag Khanna. He's from Asia, and he's loved by the global elite. He's a jet setter. He talks to groups all over the world. He wrote this in his book. Stunned me at the time. He said, global order is no longer something that can be dictated or controlled from the top down. Globalization is itself the order. That's stunning to me because what that says, that they're building a system that can interoperate with different aspects of the system. The system is going to be the thing, and eventually, someday, one guy is going to take it over, and that'll be the Antichrist. We see this foreshadowed at this point with Trump basically reforming globalization at this point to emphasize the system. The system is what will be put in place with all these technocratic initiatives. They'll have people sitting at the top of that won't be technocrats necessarily. They'll be the policy leaders. But the system is being recreated right now, right before our eyes. It's everywhere. It's in Washington, D.C., it's in Gaza, it's in Europe, the UK, and China. The system is a thing at this point.
Let's go to, well said, Patrick, of technocracy.news. Let's go to Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, the Jewish son-in-law of President Trump. And I mention that only because it's very interesting that you have a Jewish gentleman, Jared, who grew up knowing Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu has known Jared since he was quite a young man. And now here he is in this prominent role. You think about God's providence, how God moves in the affairs of men. We're studying in the book of Daniel now. Second lesson was Sunday night. I'm teaching through the book of Daniel verse by verse. Spent a year and a half teaching through the book of Revelation. Now I'm in the book of Daniel, which is the foundation for Revelation, really. And it's the first mention of the Antichrist. And we have there in the scriptures clearly shown through the book of Daniel and other places that God providentially raises up leaders and he brings down leaders. Nebuchadnezzar found that out, spent several years eating out in the yard like a cow or a bull, thinking he was better than God and bigger than God, and had his many, many gods, and even captures the vessels and the instruments out of the temple and drags them back to his temple in Babylon, to his gods, plural, as trophies. And so he thinks he's in charge. God shows him he's not. But it does show us God is in charge of not only kings and leaders, nations as they come and they go. And I think God has providentially allowed Donald Trump to come to power, but Jared where he's at, Netanyahu where he's at, all these world leaders, and they think they're in charge and building something wonderful and great, but God's going to show them ultimately, when we look back, how he was providentially moving to build or to allow a system to be built, because God is not the author of evil or confusion, but he's going to allow man to do what's in his heart. And God's going to step back and let man do what's naturally there, which I don't think was the timing for God at the Tower of Babel. So he confused it. It wasn't the timing of God for Hitler to be the Antichrist of that hour. God stopped it. But at some point, he's going to stop restraining, and he's going to let them do what's in their heart. And we're going to look back, as the scriptures tell us, and see how God providentially allowed these things to fulfill his word, and then ultimately to judge the people who think they are God or a God or bigger than God and blaspheme God. And they prosecute and persecute the followers of God. So folks, understand, you're living in biblical times. And if you study Daniel, you study Ezekiel, you study Revelation, you're going to start realizing that real quick. And I think it's fascinating that you have a president in power now who also has a Jewish son-in-law who grew up as a young man knowing Netanyahu, who ends up becoming prime minister of Netanyahu. And now this young Jewish man, the son-in-law, is going to help lead a rebuilding of Gaza. So they plan. Look at what he said today, Jared Kushner, at
so quickly, I'll go through this 2-year war, 90,000 tons of munitions. There's over 60 million tons of rubble there, and tens of thousands of fatalities. Through the ceasefire, we were able to get to the 20-point plan, ceasefire, release of hostages. Getting the UN resolution passed was a huge, huge effort, really thanks to Mike Waltz and the whole team there. They did an incredible job. And we've then, with the help of the UN, we've worked very, very well with them. This is why you need a new organization like the Board of Peace to work with the UN. I want to thank Tom Fletcher, did an incredible job of really getting it going. We've done historic humanitarian aid. Going forward, number one thing is going to be security. Obviously, we've been working very closely with the Israelis to figure out a way through de-escalation. And the next phase is working with Hamas on demilitarization, which I'll talk about in a second. But without security, nobody's going to make investments. Nobody's going to come, build there. We need investments in order to start giving jobs. We want to take these people. 85% of the aid of Gaza, 85% of the GDP of Gaza has been aid for a long time. That's not sustainable. It doesn't give these people dignity. It doesn't give them hope. And so we want to use free market economy principles. A lot of what President Trump spoke about that he's doing in America, we want to bring the same mindset, the same approach to a place like Gaza to give these people the ability to thrive and have a good life. Let's see. So on the aid, I mentioned the UN. So now people are talking about famine. 100% of the food needs are met, and that's been overabundance. The cost of goods.
Okay, I'm going to scroll forward here just a little bit to get to the interesting part. Listen to this: the master plan.
And this is for the people of Gaza. We've developed it into zones. In the beginning, we were toying with the idea of saying, let's build a free zone, and then we have a Hamas zone. And then we said, you know what, let's just plan for catastrophic success. Hamas signed a deal to demilitarize. That is what we are going to enforce. People ask us what our plan B is. We do not have a plan B. We have a plan. We signed an agreement. We are all committed to making that agreement work. There's a master plan. We'll be doing it in phasing. In the Middle East, they build cities like this in 2-3 million people. They build this in 3 years. And so stuff like this is very doable if we make it happen. Rothel will start with. This will show a lot of workforce housing. We think this could be done in 2-3 years. We've already started removing the rubble and doing some of the demolition. And then New Gaza. It could be a hope. It could be a destination, have a lot of industry, and really be a place that the people there can thrive, have great employment. Once this starts going, we think there should be 100% full employment and opportunity for everybody there. And we have a lot of data on what can be, but we think that this really gives the Gazan people an opportunity to live their aspirations. But it all starts with security, and it all starts with governance. Final note I'll just say on the Board of Peace, which is that all the lessons we're doing is we're basically studying the best practices from all over the world, and we're watching who does education the best, who does healthcare delivery the best. All of these things it's not...
All right. Wow. Now, let me ask you this, Dr. Lindsted. They got all this money over there. They got all this equipment over there. They got this Board of Peace, which you already heard President Trump say, we can pretty much do whatever we want. He's bringing in and working with Qatar. He's invited the Pope to come along. And he's bringing in Turkey and working with all these people. What if President Trump, and I think, Leo, this is going to register with you. What if President Trump, and he's got a Jewish son-in-law now, and he's talking regularly to Benjamin Netanyahu, all of them are. What if President Trump sees this is his opportunity, Dr. Lindsted, to go down in history? He's already been compared by many of the Israelis to be the Cyrus. What if it's Donald Trump, the great builder, who decides, I am going to help them build their next temple? We've got everything in play. He's a builder. He's a designer. It's all there. He's already been compared to Cyrus the Great, who helped them do that. What if President Trump has in the back of his mind helping Israel build that temple, bring peace, where you have the Islamic temple up there and the Jewish temple side by side? Talk about going down as the guy who is the peacemaker. He may not do any of that, but would it be shocked you if maybe that's the Antichrist that does that? But would you be shocked if President Trump doesn't start that initiative?
Yeah, I don't think he will be the one that builds a Jewish temple, but I think he's going to give permission. If he's compared to Cyrus, Cyrus gave permission, provided some of the materials, but the Jews themselves, the idea for the temple, and believe me, there's enough people in Israel, the conservative Jews, of which I know a number of them, and they don't want the input of Gentiles in this. They have the design for the temple in their mind. They have who the priests are, including those that were born home birth, so that they wouldn't be in a place of death. So I think he could give permission for it, but I don't see him actually being allowed to construct it. There is something though that I think is pretty important in this. Notice that we're talking about billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. And I think maybe it was Leo or somebody mentioned earlier that Trump puts a premium on money. A person, I remember one time he said in this meeting room right now, he said there's 4 geniuses. He included himself, and there were 4 billionaires. He included himself, and so then he goes, and the next day he has Saudi Arabia there, and he said, I'm going to tell him to give $1 trillion. Look, these guys are investing. No investor puts money in without you get something out of it. My concern is this, that the people that are on this board are not friends. They're not working for a common goal. Turkey hates Israel. Qatar hates Israel. There's some real, it's an unholy group of people that are together. They might be unified on let's say, peace in Ukraine or Russia, peace in the Middle East, but they're not unified in their ideologies. So sooner or later, this is going to come unraveled unless someone can come like an Antichrist and bring it together and say, okay, here we go. Right now, I'm going to be honest with you, they need a religion. If you look at it, they're political, they're talking war, they're talking money, they're talking investments. I really think that we're going to see someone come forward that's going to give it more of an ideology, a religious tone to it. And the Antichrist will do that because remember, he wants to be worshiped. Now, we have a model of that going on because I really think if we were to offer a Worldview Weekend Peace Prize and give it to Trump, I think he might come and accept it because he's title. But the truth is, he doesn't understand there's a huge difference between why Turkey's on that board, why Saudi Arabia's on that board, and why Netanyahu's on that board. And that difference is important. And I think it's going to take an Antichrist, a true Antichrist, to bring it together. And it might even take a world disaster to help unite that. I'm not sure. But I think as they look for this is where I think AI comes into play. And maybe we'll talk about it. Hopefully we'll talk about it later because they're comparing this to Genesis. Can we do that now, Brandon? Or
yeah, but I want to just clarify one thing. So you do agree that President Trump could go ahead and begin laying the foundation for permission and orchestrating the building of the temple, and then the Antichrist later is the one that actually pushes through with that.
That's right, because believe me, there are people there, and they have the design of the temple. And they're not, they don't want me as a Gentile. They don't want him as a Gentile. They believe that they know what they want to do with that temple. But what he can do is he could he could remove politically the taboo that's there right now for them to be up there doing religious ceremonies. Right now they can't. But he could, the Board of Peace, and he could say, no, they can. And once that's done, that would be the job of Cyrus. That would be the job of the Gentile. All right, now the Jews will take it, and they'll think, wow, look, we're sailing good. Halfway through the tribulation, the Antichrist, now he's in power. He says, no, I'm not going to share worship with anybody. And so he's going to stop it. But I think it'll be permission that the board could give.
Before we go back to Genesis, jump in on that, Brandon.
You know, this interesting thing about, you know, we obviously know that the third temple is going to be built, and we don't know if that's a pre-tribulational event or it's going to be built in the tribulation itself. But look, everything's in place for the third temple as far as they have the red heifers. I've seen them in Shiloh, and
I actually have some of the ashes. I actually have some of the ashes that Byron gave me in person when he spoke for us. I have a packet of those ashes myself.
So everything's in place for them to put it up. They say they could put it up in 30 days. That's how fast they could build it. But you know, the interesting thing is, and I would want to talk to Netanyahu's administration and Trump administration. At what point did anybody on these two administrations ever look to the Bible and say, wait a second, we cannot divide Israel's land to Gentiles? That violates the Abrahamic covenant. It violates the land covenant. I mean, where's Huckabee in saying, hey, stop what you're doing? Trump, you cannot take possession of land that's given to Israel. That's a violation of the Abrahamic and land covenant. And beyond that, you mentioned Jared Kushner. Does anyone want to look back at his past of how much millions of dollars he has taken away from Saudi Arabia in his affinity partner investment firm? Or how about Steve Witkoff? Let's talk about him. His own son, Alex Witkoff, went to the Qatar and UAE wanting millions of dollars in investment. And then we find out that Qatar bailed out Steve Witkoff's Park Lane Hotel in New York City, which was like falling apart in debt, and Qatar bails them out. And yet these two individuals are on the Board of Peace. They're compromised with Qatar and Saudi Arabia. How is that in the interest of Israel? And it's like the elephant's in the room and no one wants to talk about it. It's crazy. I've never seen something like this. I think it's demonically inspired, no doubt about it.
Wow. You know, I want to, and we're going to get back to Genesis and Kissinger and all of that. But you brought up all the people that are involved, dividing the land of Israel. Joel chapter 3 speaks, God says, I'm not happy because you've divided my land. And yet, apparently, we've already heard that Netanyahu's been invited, kind of like an afterthought, it sounded like almost, and people were having a fit over in Israel over it. I can imagine that. You know, America's going to be in charge, says Donald Trump, right away during the Gaza war. We're going to be in charge. You know, again, it's like, wait a minute, this is Israel's land. Are you looking to invite God's judgment? What is so ironic to me, guys, is that Donald Trump's success could be absolutely obliterated by his own behavior related to Israel. Does that mean we agree with everything the government of Israel does? No. But we understand what God's plan is politically for the land. Ezekiel 37, is it, guys? The dry bones, that 37? Yep. And we see them coming back together politically, and then we see them being filled with the Spirit. Political revival, then spiritual revival. Political, then spiritual. We've seen the political revival. They became a nation again in 48. They have to be a nation because nations make treaties. They're going to make a treaty with the Antichrist. Then there's going to be a spiritual revival during that tribulation period. Jews becoming believers like crazy, 144,000 Jewish evangelists. It's going to be so many becoming believers, Jew and Gentile. The Bible says you can hardly number them. They're being slaughtered and murdered almost as fast as they're being saved. And so we're waiting on that spiritual revival, and they're eventually going to receive and follow the Mosaic law and obey God. And they're going to roll into the millennial kingdom believing Jews and receive that Abraham land promise of Genesis 15. But we know that if we get involved by blocking them, and that's the words in Genesis 12, verse 3. I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. And that word in the original curse has to do with being an obstacle to them. blocking them. Not just opposing them. You can be for the Jews, but you could still be blocking them in ways you're not supposed to do, right? So you can think yourself, hey, I'm all for Israel. I'm pro-Israel, their right to the land. But Donald Trump doing these things, he could be blocking them in ways of having control over their own land that God says, no, that brings judgment. And I have to ask and go to this book right here by a guy I've interviewed for so many years, John Turnan, As America Has Done to Israel. And my, he points out how George H. Bush was overseas signing something that was not good for Israel. And right at that time, his Kennebunkport home gets flooded. You can go look online, folks, for the pictures. Maybe I can find some. Absolutely flooded. His own Kennebunkport home while he's over in Israel, over in somewhere in the world, signing something that wasn't good for Israel. George W., George H., Bill Clinton, he lays out every time we move against Israel or their land, God does something. God doesn't judge nations per se in the next life. He judges souls, individuals. So he has to judge nations in this life. I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you. It makes me wonder, guys, as we're watching a storm barreling down on America. Okay, I'm not going to be dogmatic on this, but when you look at that pattern of John McTernan on what happens every time we start pulling the rug out from underneath Israel and going after their land, and again, remember Joel 3, listening friends, God says, I'm angry at you because you've divided my land. Well, last night, while they're doing that over in Davos, this storm moves, and now they're saying in the last few hours of this morning, they said overnight it moved, and now it's barreling down on Washington, D.C. And half the country is going to be split or more by this storm. They're saying it's going to be historic. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we'll find out next week. Nothing. Big nothing burger. But based on past things that John McTernan and others lay out, we have problems when we start doing this. Listen to what one of my favorite meteorologist guys is saying about this, and I want you all to respond to this. Then we'll get to Genesis, Kissinger, all of this. But listen to this.
Several days ago, I told you a major winter storm was coming. Since then, the models have converged, the warnings have expanded, and even the National Weather Service is using the word historic. We now have over 200 million people in 35 states in the path of this storm. This thing's going to be 2,000 miles wide, and states like Texas and North Carolina are already declaring states of emergencies. And now even the Northeast is in play. Remember that north shift I talked about yesterday? It's holding. The I-95 corridor from D.C. to New York City is now in the significant snow zone. Some models are showing a foot or more from Virginia to Connecticut. If that holds, this is going to be the biggest snowstorm in a long time for this whole corridor. But the ice threat is still the main danger. From Texas through the Carolinas, there's going to be widespread half-inch to three-quarter-inch icing. And in some places, we're going to see more than an inch of ice accretion. That's tree snapping, power line destroying accumulation. And if you lose power on Saturday, it's possible that you're going to be without power during some of the coldest temperatures we've seen in a long time. If you haven't finished your prep...
All right, there you go. Now, I'm not going to be dogmatic here, guys. I can't. I don't know. But I am going to say this, JB. We'd better be very careful when we as a nation start moving against God. And there are many of us, like, it's coming right over Memphis. I mean, you go look at the map. It's coming right over us, right? Outside of Memphis. We're like, wait a minute, what? Why are we in the line of this? I haven't divided the land of Israel. To the contrary, I'm a strong Christian Zionist. Why am I going to be persecuted or perhaps put in danger for this, if indeed it is related to God using these natural disasters to bring judgment or warning? I don't know if that's the case, but what happens, we have to understand, is even believing Christians, well, the rain falleth on the righteous and the unrighteous. Judgment falls on the righteous and the unrighteous when we live in a nation. But then I look at it going across the Bible Belt. I'm like, why? You know why? I think because, as my friend, the late Dr. Norm Geisler used to say, there's not enough Bible under our belt. We had October 7th happen with a massacre of 1,200 Jews, and there were many, many churches in the Bible Belt that said nothing. We were getting all kinds of communications from people saying, on Sunday morning, my pastor said nothing. Or if he did, it was basically, yeah, pray for both sides. It's a complicated issue. Nothing. And many of these churches now are pushing replacement theology. The Southern Baptist Convention, obviously, that's the largest Protestant denomination in America, based out of Nashville. The Southern Baptists had a president, J.D. Greear, a few years ago, that wrote a book on Muslims and Christians worship the same God. And I'm looking at this map going, why is the Bible Belt about to be hammered? Maybe God's a little frustrated with the Bible Belt and that we want to use religion and nickels and noses to feather our beds while we disobey him vehemently. And I'm not going to be dogmatic, and I'm not saying this is, but I just find the John McTernan thesis very compelling, JB.
Well, we've just scratched the surface of what we're going to cover. This was an incredible discussion. I enjoyed it. I learned from it. I hope you've learned from it. My friend, we really need to make good use of the remaining time that we have before Christ comes back. I hope you'll share this information with your friends. I hope you'll go back and study it again. The Bible is true. Isn't that encouraging? The Bible's true. Everything that God said was going to take place is taking place even before our eyes. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow.